Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me today because honestly, we are about to completely dismantle everything you thought you knew about corporate authority. Look, if you're a manager, a leader, or a management student, you've probably spent countless hours studying org charts, dissecting leadership styles, and memorizing operational hierarchies, right? But what if I told you that the absolute most potent forces guiding your team are completely invisible? Today, we are going to look at the modern workplace through the lens of one of the 20th century's most brilliant and influential thinkers, the French philosopher Michel Foucault. We're going to uncover the invisible architecture of power that is actually running your company.
So think about this for a second. Who really holds the power in your organization? Our immediate instinct, of course, is to point straight to the CEO, the board of directors, or maybe your direct supervisor. We're so conditioned to have this very traditional top-down view of management. But Foucault proposed a radically different, honestly kind of counterintuitive idea. He argued that power isn't just this tangible thing wielded by a specific person sitting at the top of a pyramid. Instead, power is a diffuse meta-power. It is quite literally everywhere. It's coming from everywhere, all at once. It's in the water cooler chat, it's baked into your email templates, and it's heavily present in the unwritten rules of your office.
Okay, let's dive right into this. To uncover this architecture, we'll be using this 5-part framework. First, redefining power. Second, normalization and regimes of truth. Third, surveillance, evaluation, and internalization. Fourth, the productive force. And finally, discourse and resistance.
All right, Section 1, Redefining Power.
So Foucault completely moves us away from what he calls sovereign or episodic acts of domination. Think of this as the old school mentality. You know, a boss yelling, coercing, or forcing an employee to comply just through the sheer threat of firing them. And sure, while that obviously still happens sometimes, Foucault argues that modern society, and by extension, the modern corporation, relies entirely on disciplinary power. This kind of power is diffuse. It's the corporate culture itself that's shaping employee behavior. Just think about it. A manager rarely has to actually force an employee to stay late at the office anymore, right? Instead, a pervasive culture of hustle and going the extra mile does all the heavy lifting. The power is enacted and embodied in everyday actions, rather than just being a weapon possessed by the boss.
Moving right along to Section 2, Normalization and Regimes of Truth.
Foucault coined this incredibly fascinating term, regimes of truth. In his view, truth isn't just some absolute objective reality. Actually, scratch that. It's not some hidden object just waiting to be discovered. Instead, truth is produced. It's a highly structured system of constraints and accepted rules produced by institutions. Every society, and honestly, every company, has its own general politics of truth. It's the specific type of discourse, the language, the narratives, the core values that the company widely accepts and literally makes function as the undeniable truth. Like when a company relentlessly repeats the customer is always right, they are actively establishing a regime of truth that dictates exactly how everyone must behave and think.
Foucault originally observed that out in society at large, these regimes of truth are constantly reinforced and redefined by science, the education system, and the media. But look at the corporate equivalence here. It's wild how perfectly it translates. For managers, science basically becomes your industry best practices and data analytics. The societal education system, that is mirrored flawlessly by corporate training and onboarding. Think about it. When you onboard a new hire, you aren't just teaching them how to use a software program. You are systematically teaching them the accepted truth of your corporate culture. And the societal media? Well, that's your internal comms and mission statements. These are the exact mechanisms you use, whether you're conscious of it or not, to construct the absolute boundaries of what is possible and acceptable in your team's daily reality.
Okay, Section 3, Surveillance, Evaluation, and Internalization.
So Foucault was famously fascinated by 18th century administrative systems. Specifically, he looked at how places like prisons, schools, and hospitals were structurally designed. He intensely studied how physical bodies were subjugated and controlled through what he called biopower. But guys, this isn't just history. Bring it into the present and think about the modern open-plan office. Why was it truly designed? Sure, the prevailing narrative is that it's for collaboration and synergy, but structurally speaking, it allows for constant, unbroken visibility. It mirrors the exact administrative control Foucault studied in those institutions. It creates an environment where norms about conduct, work ethic, and focus are constantly, perpetually on display for everyone to see.
And this visibility builds directly into a psychological pipeline for modern management. Step 1 is surveillance, that continuous observation we just talked about. But today, this isn't just an open office layout, is it? It's keystroke tracking software, it's those little green Slack activity bubbles, and it's your CRM dashboards. Then, step 2 is evaluation. We take all this surveillance data and assess it against the norm we established earlier. Are you meeting your KPIs? How does your performance review look compared to the team average? But step three is the absolute magic trick of disciplinary power: internalization. Because of the constant surveillance and the fear of evaluation, employees essentially learn to police their own behavior. You don't need a manager standing over them with a metaphorical stick. The norm becomes so deeply psychologically embedded that employees discipline themselves without any willful coercion from anyone else. That right there is Foucault's power in action.
Which brings us to Section 4, the productive force.
Now, Foucault is actually one of the few prominent writers on power who genuinely recognized its positive capacity. He firmly insists that we must stop describing power purely in negative terms, the idea that it only excludes, represses, or censors. Instead, he argues, and I quote, "In fact, power produces. It produces reality. It produces domains of objects and rituals of truth." Power, in his view, is an absolutely necessary and productive force in society, and by extension, in your business.
So as a manager or a management student, think about what this actually means for you. This diffuse, everyday power is exactly the mechanism that produces the positive realities you rely on every single day. Without these regimes of truth and normalized behaviors, you literally wouldn't have team cohesion, you wouldn't have shared knowledge, or a unified corporate identity. Efficient workflows rely entirely on people internalizing the right way to do things. The rituals of truth you create, like the Monday morning all-hands meeting or the quarterly performance review, they actually produce a shared reality that allows hundreds or even thousands of totally different individuals to work together toward a common goal. This invisible power is essentially the glue holding the entire organization together.
And finally, Section 5, discourse and resistance.
Contrary to some fatalistic interpretations of his work, Foucault believed very strongly in human agency. He saw a vital, essential role for what is called the organic intellectual. For management students and current leaders tuning in, this is your mandate. True agency and leadership come from having the capacity to recognize and question those deeply socialized norms that usually operate completely beyond our everyday perception. An organic intellectual in the workplace pauses and asks, wait, why do we actually evaluate performance this specific way? Or who does this grueling onboarding process actually serve? It's all about spotting the invisible constraints in your culture and having the courage to challenge them.
And how exactly do we challenge them? Well, through discourse. Discourse is a site of both power and resistance. The very same language and mission statements used to enforce corporate power can actually be analyzed, subverted, and rewritten to challenge the status quo. If a company's discourse constantly pushes efficiency at all costs, employees and middle managers can deliberately create a counter-discourse around sustainable productivity or employee well-being. Discourse transmits and reinforces power absolutely, but as Foucault noted, it also exposes it and makes it entirely possible to thwart. We can flip the script, shape alternative framings, and completely redefine the boundaries of our workplace.
We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, completely reframing modern management through Foucault's brilliant concepts of diffuse power, normalization, surveillance, and discourse. So I want to leave you with this final, genuinely provocative thought. What regimes of truth are you unconsciously enforcing in your own organization? Are the norms you relentlessly promote creating a healthy, productive reality, or are they silently constraining your team's true potential? Take a hard, honest look at your invisible architecture. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning the everyday power dynamics around you. Catch you next time.